My mother and sister demanded I hand over my $50,000 bonus to pay for my sister's rent. They thought I would cave like always, sending dozens of texts and threats. So I made one phone call, packed one bag, and moved to Portugal before they even woke up. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The email arrived at 4:32 p.m. on a Thursday, its subject line a bland corporate heading. Ray, Project Nightingale Performance Review. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. For 3 months, I had poured every ounce of my energy into this project, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the glow of my monitors deep into the night. As a senior data analyst, my job was to find stories in numbers, to translate chaotic data streams into clear, actionable strategies. Project Nightingale was my symphony, a complex and beautiful architecture of code and analytics that I had built from the ground up. My cursor hovered over the message, trembling slightly. This was it. The culmination of a year's worth of work, of missed social events and tired weekends. I clicked. My eyes scanned past the corporate jargon, the paragraphs of praise for exceptional dedication and unprecedented results, searching for the one thing that mattered. And then I saw it. The number was so large, so clean and perfect with its zeros that it didn't seem real. A performance bonus of $50,000. I gasped, a sharp, involuntary intake of air. My hands flew to my mouth, and I leaned back in my chair, the worn leather groaning in protest. $50,000. It was more than a number. It was a key. It was the down payment on the small townhouse I had bookmarked for months. It was the start of a life that was truly my own, built by my own hands, my own mind. A wave of giddy, triumphant joy washed over me. I wanted to shout, to run down the sterile hallways of the office and tell someone, anyone. But there was only one person I truly wanted to share this moment with first: my mom. Despite everything, despite the years of subtle and not-so-subtle favoritism, a part of me, the stubborn, hopeful child within, still craved her approval. I imagined her voice, warm with pride. "Oh, Amelia, that's my girl. I always knew you had it in you." The thought was so sweet it made my throat ache. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling with the screen as I pulled up her contact. I stepped out into the empty corridor, the silence of the late afternoon punctuated only by the hum of the ventilation system. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Amelia, is everything all right?" Her voice was laced with its usual thread of anxiety, the default setting whenever I called unexpectedly. "Everything is more than all right, Mom," I said, my voice bubbling with excitement. "You're not going to believe what just happened. I got my performance review for Project Nightingale." "Oh, that thing you've been working on. Did it go well?" she asked, her tone distracted. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background. She was probably watching one of her daytime shows. "It went better than well, Mom. They gave me a bonus." I paused for dramatic effect, a wide smile stretching across my face. A big one. "How nice, dear. You know, your sister was just telling me her landlord is raising the rent again. It's just so unfair what they do to artists. She can barely afford her supplies as it is." My smile faltered. It was like a needle scratching across a record, a jarring, discordant sound in the middle of my beautiful symphony. This was a familiar pattern, a conversational sleight of hand she had perfected over decades. Any good news of mine was immediately used as a bridge to my sister, Chloe's latest struggle. "That's too bad," I said, trying to steer the conversation back. "But Mom, listen, the bonus is $50,000. The television sound in the background abruptly stopped. There was a beat of pure, unadulterated silence. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe the sheer size of the number had shocked her into a moment of genuine pride. Maybe now she would finally see me. 50,000, she repeated, her voice low and careful, as if she were handling a fragile, priceless object. "Yes, I can finally put a down payment on that townhouse. I can actually own a home." My voice was thick with emotion. This was the dream I had been working towards for my entire adult life. The silence stretched on for another few seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice was different. The feigned distraction was gone, replaced by a chillingly calm, practical tone that sent a shiver down my spine. It was the voice she used when she had decided on a course of action and would not be swayed. "That's wonderful, dear," she said, and the W. Warmth in her voice was so artificial it felt like ice. "Now you can finally help your sister." The words hung in the air between us, cold and heavy. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a declaration, a verdict on what my success was for, who my money belonged to. The giddy joy that had filled me only moments before evaporated, replaced by a familiar, sinking feeling of dread. The key I thought I had just received wasn't for my own future. In her eyes, it was just another key to another door in Chloe's endless hallway of needs. The betrayal was so swift, so predictable, yet it still managed to cut me to the bone. My mind reeled, struggling to process the whiplash of the last 2 minutes. I had gone from the highest point of my professional life to the bottom of a familiar, suffocating family pit. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. "Help her," I echoed, my voice barely a whisper. "What do you mean, help her?" "Don't be difficult, Amelia," my mother sighed, a sound of pure, put-upon exhaustion, as if I were the one making unreasonable demands. "You know Chloe is struggling. Her landlord is a monster. He's threatening to evict her if she can't come up with a deposit for the new lease, plus the increased rent for the next 2 months. She needs $10,000 by the end of the month." $10,000. Just like that. A fifth of my bonus, a sum that had taken me years of effort to earn, was being casually reallocated to fund my sister's inability to live within her means. Chloe, a self-proclaimed freelance artist and aspiring influencer, lived in a trendy loft apartment that cost more than my own sensible one-bedroom, despite having no discernible income. "Mom, no," I said, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. "I told you this money is for a house, my house. I've been saving for years. This bonus is what finally gets me there." "A house can wait," she said dismissively. "You have a good job, a stable life. Your sister has nothing. She's a sensitive soul, you know that. The stress of being homeless could destroy her creative spirit." The sheer audacity of her words left me speechless. My stability wasn't a source of pride for her, it was a resource to be tapped. My hard work wasn't an achievement, it was Chloe's safety net. "Chloe is a 28-year-old woman," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and hurt. "She could get a part-time job. She could move to a cheaper apartment. There are a dozen other options besides me handing her $10,000. "You always do this," Karen snapped, her voice turning sharp and accusatory. "You always make everything so transactional. This is family, Amelia. We help each other. You have more than enough and your sister has nothing. It's a simple matter of what's right." The conversation was over. I knew it. There was no reasoning with her when she had her what's right narrative locked in place. I was the cold, calculating daughter, and Chloe was the struggling artist who deserved to be protected. "I have to go, Mom," I said, my throat tight. "I have to get back to work." "Think about your sister, Amelia," she said, her final words a command cloaked in a plea. "Think about what a good sister would do." She hung up. I stood in the empty corridor, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dead air. The silence was more damning than her words. I slowly lowered the phone and stared at its blank screen. A minute later, it buzzed in my hand, a text from my mom. "Chloe is crying, I hope you're happy." My stomach twisted. This was the next stage of the attack, the emotional guilt trip. I slid the phone into my pocket, my hands trembling. I walked back to my desk in a daze, the celebratory atmosphere of my earlier achievement now feeling like a distant memory. I sank into my chair and stared at my computer screen, the congratulatory email still open. The numbers, which had once looked so beautiful, now seemed tainted. Then my phone buzzed again, and again, and again, I pulled it out. A text from Chloe. "Mom told me about your bonus. Congrats, I guess. Must be nice not to have to worry about being thrown out on the street. Another from Mom, she's beside herself. She thinks you hate her. From Chloe, I just need a little help to get back on my feet. Is that too much to ask? I'd do it for you. The lie was so blatant it was almost funny. Chloe had never sacrificed a single thing for me in her life. The texts kept coming, a rapid-fire assault of guilt, entitlement, and passive aggression. They painted a picture of a desperate girl on the verge of ruin and a cold-hearted sister hoarding her wealth. By the time I left the office an hour later, there were 19 new messages. 19 demands, pleas, and accusations. I drove home on autopilot, my mind a chaotic storm of anger, resentment, and a deep, profound sadness. For years, I had navigated this toxic dynamic. I had set boundaries, Ad said no, but I had always done it from within the system. I had always stayed, hoping that one day they would change. That one day they would see me. As I sat in the parking lot of my apartment building, the barrage of texts continued. My phone was a weapon being used against me. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, so complete and so final it felt like a surrender. But it wasn't. It was a clarification. They would never change. This cycle would repeat itself forever, with every promotion, every bonus, every small piece of success I carved out for myself. It would always be theirs to claim. Unless I left the system entirely. A strange calm settled over me. The chaotic storm in my mind stilled, and in its place, a single, clear thought emerged. An idea I had entertained as a fantasy for years, a little daydream I would indulge in after a particularly draining phone call with my mother. A folder on my laptop, password protected and buried deep within another folder, labeled simply contingency. They had forgotten one crucial thing: I was a planner. My entire career was built on foresight, on anticipating outcomes and preparing for every variable. And I had been planning for this day for years. The roots of this conflict ran deep, twisting through the very soil of my childhood. My family was a small, 3-person solar system, and from the very beginning, Chloe was the sun. My mother, Karen, and I were just planets, our orbits dictated by the gravitational pull of Chloe's needs and desires. Chloe was the artistic one, the sensitive soul. When she finger-painted on the living room walls at age 6, she wasn't making a mess. She was expressing her burgeoning creativity. When I, at age 8, got a perfect score on a math test, my mother's response was a distracted, "That's nice, dear. Now go help your sister with her homework. She's struggling with fractions." My role was established early. I was the responsible one, the capable one, the one who didn't need as much attention because I could take care of myself. This wasn't presented as a strength, but as a utility. My self-sufficiency meant my mother could dedicate all her emotional energy to Chloe. I learned to be quiet, to be studious, to be helpful. I learned that my achievements were valuable only in how they could benefit the family unit, which really just meant benefiting Chloe. When I was in high school, I worked a grueling part-time job at a grocery store to save for a school trip to France. I had saved nearly $1,000, meticulously tucking away every dollar. A week before the final payment was due, Chloe came to me in tears. She had accidentally broken a neighbor's expensive camera that she had borrowed without permission. My mother sat me down at the kitchen table, her face a mask of weary disappointment. "You know how she is, Amelia," she had said. "She's just so flighty. You're the one with the savings. It's the right thing to do." I gave them the money. I told my friends I was sick and couldn't go on the trip. I watched their pictures flood social media from Paris, a hollow ache in my chest. Chloe never paid me back. My mother never mentioned it again. It was my first major lesson. My dreams were expendable. My sister's mistakes were not. This pattern only solidified as we grew into adults. I went to a state university on a scholarship and worked 2 jobs to graduate debt-free. Chloe enrolled in a prestigious private art school, which my mother paid for by taking out a second mortgage on her house. Chloe dropped out after 3 semesters, claiming the structured environment was stifling her muse. Yet in my mother's eyes, I was the one who had it easy. "You were always so good with numbers," she'd say, as if my degree in data analytics was something I was born with, not something I had earned through countless sleepless nights in the library. Chloe's failure to launch, meanwhile, was romanticized. She wasn't unemployed. She was finding herself. She wasn't financially irresponsible. She was unconcerned with the crass materialism of the world. Chloe, for her part, absorbed this narrative completely. She developed a languid sense of entitlement, viewing me not as a sister, but as a personal grant foundation. Over the years, I had paid for her essential art supplies that sat unused in her apartment, covered her half of the rent when she was too inspired to work, and bailaid her out of credit card debt she had accumulated buying vintage clothes and brunching with her friends. Each time I would resist, and each time my mother would intervene, wielding guilt like a master craftsman. "What is the point of all your success if you can't be generous to your own sister?" she would ask. The introduction of Chloe's influencer persona was the latest and most infuriating chapter. Her social media was a curated gallery of a life she couldn't afford. She'd post photos of herself at expensive cafes, artfully holding a coffee she'd later ask me to pay for. Her captions were filled with vague platitudes about living your truth and chasing your passion. Her passion, as far as I could tell, was spending money she didn't have. My mother was her biggest fan. She would call me, gushing about Chloe's latest post. "Did you see that beautiful photo she took? She has such an eye. That's a real gift, Amelia. Not everyone is blessed with that kind of talent." The implication was always clear. My talent, logic, discipline, hard work was common and mundane. Chloe's talent, taking filtered photos of her lattes, was rare and precious, something that must be protected and funded at all costs. The resentment had been simmering inside me for years, a low-grade fever that never quite broke. The demand for my bonus wasn't a new wound, it was salt poured into a very old one. It was the ultimate crystallization of my family's philosophy. Everything I built was simply a resource to be harvested for Chloe's benefit. They didn't see me, my dreams, or my future. They saw a solution to their problem. A walking, talking ATM. And tonight, the ATM was finally shutting down. I walked into my apartment and shut the door, the click of the lock echoing in the sudden silence. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I ignored it. For a moment, I just stood in the entryway, my work bag slipping from my shoulder and thudding onto the floor. I looked around at the life I had built. The comfortable sofa, the bookshelf overflowing with novels and technical manuals, the small piece of art I had bought from a local artist, not my sister. It was a quiet life, an orderly life. And it was about to be dismantled. The 19th text had been the final straw. It was from Chloe. "Mom is having chest pains from all the stress. I swear, if you give her a heart attack over this, I will never forgive you." The manipulation was so grotesque, so transparently vile, that it snapped something inside me. The years of accumulated hurt and resentment didn't curdle into sadness or defeat. Instead, they crystallized into something hard, clear, and cold: resolve. My hands were perfectly steady as I walked over to my desk and powered on my laptop. I entered my password and navigated through a series of mundane folders: work, finances, household, until I reached one cryptically labeled recipes. Inside that folder was another, called Portuguese stew. And inside that, a single, password-protected file named Contingency Plan, Lisbon. This wasn't an investigation in the traditional sense. I didn't need to uncover damaging information about my family. I knew all I needed to know. This was a review of my own research, a final check of a meticulously constructed escape route I had been building in secret for the better part of 3 years. It had started as a fantasy, a mental escape hatch. After a particularly bad fight about money, I had started researching countries with favorable visa programs for remote workers. Portugal, with its beautiful coastlines, rich history, and welcoming digital nomad community, had quickly risen to the top of the list. The fantasy slowly morphed into a plan. I opened a high-yield savings account at a separate, online-only bank, one my family knew nothing about. I started funneling a small portion of every paycheck into it. I researched international banking, shipping logistics, and long-term rental markets in Lisbon. I opened the file. It was a master checklist, a data analyst's dream of perfect organization. Every step of the process was broken down into actionable items, complete with hyperlinks, contact information, and estimated timelines. It was a roadmap to a new life. Tonight, I was no longer a victim of my family's emotional blackmail. I was a project manager, and my own liberation was Project Nightingale too. My first move was financial. I logged into my primary bank account, the one my mother was a co-signer on from my college days, a detail I'm sure she saw as a convenient point of access. I initiated a wire transfer of my entire life savings and the freshly deposited $50,000 bonus to my secret, international-friendly online bank. The site warned that a transfer of this size could take a few hours to process. That was fine. I had a few hours. Next, assets. I own my car outright. I opened my browser and went to the website of a major online car retailer that promised instant cash offers and 24/7 pickup. I entered my car's VIN, mileage, and condition. An offer appeared on the screen almost instantly. It was a few thousand less than a private sale, but I wasn't optimizing for profit. I was optimizing for speed. I accepted the offer. A confirmation email arrived moments later, stating a representative would be at my address between 1:00 a.m. and 3:00 a.m. to inspect the vehicle and hand me a check. Then my belongings. My apartment was filled with good, solid furniture I had purchased over the years. Selling it piece by piece would take weeks. My plan accounted for this. I had researched and vetted a rapid consignment service that specialized in apartment clearouts for people who were moving suddenly. They would come, assess the value of everything, and take it all away, wiring you a percentage of the sales later. I filled out their online form, uploaded a few photos of my apartment, and requested the earliest possible pickup. The confirmation came back. A 3-person crew would arrive between 3:00 a.m. and 5:00 a.m. The final and most crucial step, the exit itself. I opened a flight aggregator website. I typed in my home airport and the destination, LIS Lisbon, Portugal. I selected a one-way ticket for the earliest flight out in the morning, 6:15 a.m. I entered my passport details and paid with my new bank's virtual debit card. The boarding pass materialized in my inbox. The entire process, the transfer of my life savings, the sale of my car, the liquidation of my furniture, and the purchase of an international flight, took exactly 47 minutes. My clever trap wasn't a witty retort or a legal maneuver. It was logistical perfection. It was the overwhelming force of a quiet, methodical woman who had been pushed too far. I was not trapping them. I was liberating myself with such speed and finality that they wouldn't even know what happened until I was already gone. With the logistics of my departure set in motion, a strange sense of calm descended. The incessant buzzing of my phone had become background noise, like the hum of a distant engine. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind the quiet, focused work of dismantling my life. My confrontation wasn't going to be a tearful showdown or a screaming match. It would be a single, surgical act of severance. I picked up my phone, 23 missed texts now. I opened the message thread, my thumb hovering over the screen. I scrolled past the guilt trips from my mom and the passive-aggressive jabs from Chloe. I found the last message I had received before starting my plan, the one about my mother's chest pains. My fingers moved quickly, typing a short, simple reply. No anger, no explanation, no emotion at all. Don't text again. I sent it, then I opened Chloe's contact and tapped block. I did the same for my mother. A profound sense of relief washed over me as I severed that digital tether. It was the first real step. The wall was going up. Next came the financial firewall. I logged back into my old bank account. The wire transfer was still processing. I navigated to the account settings. I found the section on joint account holders and, with a few clicks, submitted a request to remove Karen as a co-signer and signatory. The system informed me it would take 48 hours to finalize, but the request was in. Then, I went to my credit cards. I had two, one primary card and one that my mother was an authorized user on for emergencies. Over the years, emergencies had come to include everything from expensive groceries to a new handbag for Chloe. I logged into the credit card portal and with a single click, reported her card as lost stolen, effectively deactivating it instantly. I then froze my own card. My new bank had already provided me with a digital debit card for Apple Pay, which was all I would need for the next several hours. Every action felt deliberate and liberating. Each click was a brick in the wall I was building between my past and my future. I was not just running away, I was methodically taking back every ounce of control they had ever had over me. I looked around my apartment. It no longer felt like a home. It was a stage set that was about to be struck. I pulled out my largest suitcase and a backpack. The contingency plan had a detailed packing list: passport, essential documents, laptop and chargers, a week's worth of versatile clothing, one sentimental object. I walked to my bookshelf and pulled out a small, framed photo of my father who had passed away when I was a teenager. He was the one who had encouraged my love of math, who had told me I could do anything. I carefully wrapped it in a sweater and placed it in my suitcase. Everything else was just stuff. As the hours ticked by, the silence in my apartment was a welcome comfort. There were no more texts, no more calls. The world had gone quiet. It was just me and my plan. Around 1:30 a.m., my doorbell rang. It was the tow truck driver for the car. He was polite and professional, barely looking at me as he did a quick inspection of the car in the dim light of the parking lot. He had me sign a few forms on a tablet, handed me a cashier's check, and then expertly hooked my sedan to his truck. I watched from my window as my car, my daily commuter and vessel for 1,000 mundane errands, was towed away into the night. It felt surreal, like watching a scene from a movie. I deposited the check instantly using my new bank's mobile app. The funds appeared in my account within minutes. Step 1 of the physical liquidation was complete. The next few hours were a blur of activity. I packed my remaining items, consolidating everything I was leaving behind into neat piles for the consignment crew. I cleaned the apartment, wiping down counters and sweeping floors. It was a strange, almost spiritual act of closure. I was leaving this place better than I had found it, a final act of the responsible daughter, even if only for myself. At 3:45 a.m., the consignment crew arrived. 3 men with dollies and moving blankets worked with quiet efficiency. They were respectful and quick, inventorying my furniture and boxing up my kitchenware. I sat on my suitcase in the now empty living room, the echo of their movements a stark reminder of the life I was leaving behind. Within an hour, they were gone. My apartment was a hollow shell, stripped bare of my identity. All that was left was me, my suitcase, and my backpack. The final reveal was not to them, but to myself. Standing in the empty room, I realized that I wasn't just escaping my family. I was escaping the person I had been forced to be in their presence, the ever-giving, ever-patient, ever-responsible Amelia. The money, the car, the furniture, they weren't the price of my freedom. They were the weight I was finally allowing myself to shed. The hour before dawn is a strange, liminal space. The world is quiet, holding its breath before the frenzy of a new day. For me, sitting on the floor of my empty apartment, it was the final countdown. The stakes were no longer emotional, they were logistical. My flight was at 6:15 a.m. My Uber was scheduled for 5:00 a.m. Any unforeseen delay, a problem with the landlord, a security issue at the airport, could jeopardize the entire operation. My case for a new life was built on a foundation of precise timing. I spent the last hour performing a final sweep. I checked every drawer and closet to ensure I hadn't left anything important behind. I gathered my keys, made a final pot of coffee using the travel mug I was taking with me, and drank it black, staring out the window at the slowly lightening sky. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were a ghost haunting my own life. The apartment held no sentimentality for me anymore. It was just a box I had temporarily inhabited. My phone buzzed. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought they had found a way through my blocks. But it was just the Uber notification. My ride was arriving. I took a deep breath. This was it. I slung my backpack over my shoulders and grabbed the handle of my suitcase. I took one last look at the empty rooms, then walked out and locked the door behind me for the last time. As per my lease agreement, which was month to month, I had already sent my 30-day notice to my landlord via email, a pre-drafted message I had scheduled to send at midnight. I walked to the leasing office and dropped my keys into the secure after-hours drop box. The sound of the keys hitting the bottom of the metal box was a sound of finality. Another tie severed. The ride to the airport was silent. The city was still asleep. We drove past my office building, its dark windows staring out like vacant eyes. I felt a pang of sadness, not for the job, but for the version of me who had worked so hard there, believing that professional success would somehow earn her the personal validation she craved. She had been so naive. I was leaving her behind, too. The airport was beginning to stir with early morning travelers. The check-in and security process was smooth and automated. I moved through it with a sense of calm purpose. I wasn't a frantic person running away. I was a seasoned traveler on a routine trip. No one gave me a second glance. Once I was at my gate, I allowed myself to sit down and breathe. I bought an overpriced bottle of water and a pastry, my first meal in what felt like days. As I ate, I watched the ground crew preparing the plane that would be my chariot to a new world. It was real. This was all real. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the horizon in shades of pink and orange. It felt symbolic, like the dawn of my own life. The darkness of the past was receding, making way for something new and bright. Boarding began on time. I found my window seat, stowed my backpack, and settled in. I didn't turn on my phone. There was nothing for me back there, only a digital ghost town of my own making. The plane filled up around me, a microcosm of humanity, families going on vacation, business travelers, students, each with their own story. I was just another passenger, anonymous and free. As the plane taxied onto the runway, I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window. I watched the familiar landscape of my city, the city where I was born, where I had built a career, where I had tried so hard to be a good daughter and a good sister, shrink beneath me. The engines roared, and we lifted into the air, ascending through a layer of clouds. And then we broke through. We were above the clouds, flying into a sky of brilliant, unending blue. The sun was dazzling. A single tear traced a path down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness or of anger. It was a tear of pure, unadulterated relief. The case was closed. I had built it, argued it, and won. The verdict was my freedom. And my new life was waiting for me, thousands of miles across the ocean. The 8-hour flight to Lisbon passed in a surreal, dreamlike state. I watched movies I couldn't remember, ate food I barely tasted, and slept a deep, exhausted sleep, the likes of which I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, there was no knot of anxiety in my stomach, no impending sense of dread about a phone call or text message. There was only the gentle hum of the engines and the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean below. When the pilot announced our descent into Lisbon, my heart began to beat a little faster. This was the moment of truth. The meticulous planning, the frantic escape, it all led to this. As the plane broke through the clouds, the city unfolded beneath me, a breathtaking tapestry of terracotta roofs, winding cobblestone streets, and the sparkling blue of the Tagus River. It was more beautiful than any picture I had ever seen. I deplaned and moved through customs and immigration with ease. The agent stamped my passport with a firm, decisive thud, and just like that, I was in. I was officially in Portugal. I collected my single suitcase from the baggage claim and walked out of the airport into the warm, late afternoon sun. The air smelled different, laced with the scent of salt from the nearby ocean and roasting chestnuts from a street vendor. I found a quiet corner, and for the first time since leaving my apartment, I took out my phone and turned it on. I was connected to the airport's Wi-Fi, and the notifications came flooding in. It was a digital tidal wave. 92 missed calls, a near-even split between Mom and Chloe. 147 text messages. I didn't read them, but the previews were a chaotic jumble of fury, fake concern, and threats. 4 emails, all from an unknown sender with the subject line, "Urgent legal matter regarding AMELIA-VANCE." My hand trembled slightly. This was the backlash I had anticipated. This was the desperate, final attempt to pull me back into their orbit. I took a deep, steadying breath, reminding myself that I was thousands of miles away. They had no power here. My curiosity got the better of me, and I opened one of the emails. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. The language was pompous and full of hollow legal jargon. It spoke of familial financial obligations, concerns of mental distress, and unauthorized liquidation of shared family assets. It was utter nonsense. I had broken no laws. I was an independent adult. The car was in my name. The apartment lease was in my name. The bank account, now empty, was mine. The lawyer's letter was a scare tactic, a bluff, and a poorly executed one at that. They had likely paid a cut-rate lawyer a few $100s to write a threatening letter based on my mother's hysterical, one-sided story. I started to laugh. It began as a small chuckle and grew into a full, belly-aching laugh of pure, unadulterated triumph. I stood in the middle of a busy Portuguese airport, surrounded by strangers, and laughed until tears streamed down my face. This was their checkmate, a blustering email. They had truly underestimated me. With a sense of finality, I deleted all 4 emails without reading the rest. I deleted the voicemails without listening to them. I cleared the hundreds of text notifications. Then, I went into my phone's settings and changed my number. For a small fee, my carrier issued me a new number instantly. My old one was now a disconnected ghost. The climax of my story wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It wasn't a tearful reconciliation. It was this, a quiet moment of technological severance in a foreign land. It was the realization that their entire arsenal, their anger, their guilt, their threats, was utterly useless. I had built a fortress they couldn't breach, not with lawyers or with tears. I ordered a ride to the small, sunny Airbnb I had booked in the Alfama district. As the car wound its way through the ancient, beautiful streets, I rolled down the window and let the breeze wash over me. I was anonymous. I was untethered. For the first time in my life, I was completely and totally free. I arrived at my temporary new home, a charming apartment with a small balcony overlooking the rooftops. I stepped out onto it, looked out at the city glowing in the golden light of the setting sun, and took my first real breath as the master of my own life. The first few weeks in Lisbon were a blissful blur. I felt like a person waking up from a long, feverish dream. The constant, low-grade anxiety that had been my companion for decades was gone. In its place was a profound sense of peace. I spent my days exploring my new city, getting lost in the labyrinthine streets, discovering hidden courtyards, and drinking strong coffee at sidewalk cafes. I established a new routine. I found a co-working space with a vibrant community of fellow remote workers from all over the world. My job, which had once felt like a means to an end, now felt like a gift that had granted me this incredible freedom. I worked during the day, my mind sharp and focused without the background noise of family drama. In the evenings, I took Portuguese language classes, slowly learning to wrap my tongue around the beautiful, melodic sounds of my new home. I made friends. People were drawn to my quiet confidence, and I found myself opening up in ways I never had before. My new friends knew nothing of my past, of the responsible daughter or the family ATM. They just knew me, Amelia, the data analyst who loved hiking on the coast and had a surprisingly sharp sense of humor. For the first time, I was defining myself on my own terms. About 2 months after my arrival, I received an email from a cousin on my dad's side, Sarah. We had never been close, but we were friendly. My mother had clearly given her this new, professional email address I had set up. I braced myself for another round of guilt, but Sarah's message was different. "Hi, Amelia," it read. "Your mom got my email from my Christmas card list. She's been telling everyone in the family that you had a mental breakdown and were kidnapped by some online cult. I figured that probably wasn't true, just wanted to check in and make sure you're okay." I smiled. It was exactly the kind of narrative I expected my mother to spin, one where I was a helpless victim, not a decisive agent of my own life. I wrote back a simple, truthful reply. "Hi Sarah, thanks for reaching out. I'm more than okay. I moved to Portugal for a new job opportunity and I absolutely love it. I've never been happier. There was no breakdown and no cult, just a much-needed life change. I hope you and your family are well." A week later, Sarah replied again. "I'm so glad to hear it. Good for you. To be honest, things are a mess back here. Chloe got evicted last month. She had to move in with your mom, and from what I hear, it's a total disaster. They're fighting constantly. Chloe is blaming your mom for not having enough money to support her art, and your mom is blaming Chloe for being lazy. It's ugly. I guess they're finally having to face the music without you there to clean up the mess. You definitely made the right call." I read the email twice. I felt no surge of triumph, no satisfaction in their misery. All I felt was a quiet, distant sense of validation. It was the final piece of data I needed to close the case file on my old life. Their toxicity was a self-sustaining ecosystem, and I had simply removed myself from it. Now, without me to act as a buffer and a resource, they had turned on each other. I closed my laptop and walked out to my balcony. The sun was setting over the river, and the sky was a brilliant canvas of orange and purple. The sounds of the city, the distant clang of a tram, the murmur of conversations from the restaurant below, the faint melody of a fado guitar washed over me. This was my life now. It was a life I had chosen, a life I had built. It was peaceful, it was beautiful, and it was entirely my own. My bonus hadn't just bought me a ticket to a new country, it had bought me myself. And that was a price I would gladly pay again.